invitation to Alan and Robin from the Methven Community Board. Megan is running late, so we'll give her an invitation, and we'll give you speaking rights effectively. So you just push your button and you get in the queue, and you'll get about to contribute to the workshop, which is hopefully helpful. Okay, I'll pass over to Andy to kick us off and lead us.
Well, thanks, councillors. Effectively, this is the requested from council when we brought the water metering report to council for receipt. What I'm going to take you through here is basically a bit of a background to the project. We're going to talk a wee bit about demand trends on the water supply. I'm going to try and provide some information around how we calculate water loss, and then also the water balance, which is a term you guys have probably heard from me a few times. We're also going to talk a wee bit about the other information that we get from metering, and certainly some of the ways to tackle water loss. And we've got some suggested next steps, which will be how we conclude. So the project began, it was meant to be, well, it was part of the last LTP, and the intention was that we would do water metering in Methven as a trial. The aims of the trial were obviously to try and find connections with problems. We wanted to calculate a water balance, and what that does is tell us the share of losses from the public network versus what's happening on the private network. We were hoping to develop some reports and analysis that we could be repeatable and use over and over again. We wanted to improve our water loss estimate, which is at the moment, some of our annual plan reporting, we're reporting quite a large number. Also trying to understand the logistics of a metering rollout for, say, Ashburton, where there's significantly more meters involved. Council was very clear there was going to be no changes to billing as part of this, so it wasn't a subversive plot to bring in volumetric charging at that stage. So that was a key messaging around the project when it went out. So the background, initially the project was planned for the financial year of 21-22. COVID-related delays meant we couldn't actually get the metering into the country. But most meters were installed by late 2021. At that time, there was still a number, like about 75 meters that weren't installed. They were typically commercial properties, or certainly any installation that required a bespoke meter installation. For the meters that we did have in, we had a summer student over the 22-23 summer. That did some work. It gave us some insight initially. And then routine readings were starting to be taken from about May 23.
Welcome, Megan.
Okay, so I'll just quickly talk about demand trends. So this is a multi-year trend of water consumption, the plant flow anyway, for the Methven supply. The first thing there is you see the general summer peaks across that period. So there's a bit of variation, but there's also a bit of a move up. And that's sort of represented by that trend line there. There are some different blocks of trend within that larger graph. So you'll see a high trend up, and then we have these little breaks come down. They actually correspond to clusters of those drops they correspond to clusters of repairs being carried out. Some cases there's just one single repair, but in other times there's just a cluster of CRMs relating to water leaks, and that delivers a bit of a scheme drop. The new plant went online about September last year, so that's that point there. And again, this is corrected for, this is only the Methven scheme. So although at that time the plant flow was supplying both schemes, this is only Methven data.
Got a question. Sorry, just a question. Do you compare it with the number of new houses that are going in? Like, does that sort of come into effect? Because I know that we've had a bit of a boom up there with 300 new sections coming in. So does that make, I mean, do you work that out, and does that sort of have any?
Yeah, so some of that is growth, but of course the other issue is that and we're going to talk about the water loss part of that, but that's also heading up as well, even with the higher demand associated with growth. So in terms of one of the calculations we look at is the minimum night flow. So in the theory is that if you look at the flow on the scheme in the early hours of the morning, we're looking for the lowest flow point, and that is meant to be a sort of we use it as a proxy for what might be being lost in the scheme. So we have that figure. We subtract an allowance of about 2.5 litres per property per hour, which is purported to be an average legitimate overnight use. And then we basically calculate the percentage loss by dividing that loss by the total water supplied. So for this graph here, this is plotting that showing us the minimum night flow. We've focused on this little area here. We got away from that area to the left where there's a lot of peaks and troughs. So we felt that was the best representation of the minimum night flow. That brings in a figure of about 11.8 litres a second. So we're finding the lowest flow. We're then dividing it by, we're just calculating it out to what it is in litres per hour, dividing by the number of properties, and you're getting 40.38 litres per property per hour. You subtract the legitimate use, which is that 2.5 there, and you get down to 37.8. But once you deliver it right through, estimating out of the total water supplied, you end up with that bottom figure, which is the 61.3% total loss.
Councillor Millen?
Yeah, I've got another question, sorry. When I first started on the community board, we used to get those flow rates as part of our agenda, and I mean, we'd discuss them, we couldn't do much about it, but it was just information that was quite handy to have. Are they hard to produce, or is it worth having them in the community board agendas going forward, or is it not really?
They're easy to produce.
Yeah.
Once they're set up. I think that report might have, the original report that we used to use may have been compromised when we upgraded the scheme, but they're easy to set up, and once they're set up they can be repeatable. Because
I'm just thinking, at our community board meetings we'll have someone from Annie from the Snowfed sitting in there. If she sees that's good information that can get kind of filtered back to the community through the local paper, and just sort of, hang on, what are you doing to minimise that sort of night flow? And I know when the meters first came on, I got a knock at the door from someone from ACL saying that my meter was ticking over pretty quick, and so I did the old check the meter last thing at night, and then first thing in the morning worked out I had about 600 litres going out each day. Checked through the house, and it was my toilet system just running. Got that fixed and it stopped. And there'd be lots of people out there that would have those sorts of things happening, wouldn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, look, going forward, we can make that information available to the community board again.
I don't know if the rest of the board think that would be useful or not, but
I think using it,
Push them, yeah.
using it as you were talking about, Liz, I think is probably a good idea, and getting the community more involved in trying to find and reduce this usage, which, as you look up there, is pretty horrendous.
So what's minimum night flow done over a period of time? So it does show a general increase in minimum night flow. That graphs over a multi-year period. Actually a bit smaller than ideal.
Can I just ask why the sudden increase for that?
It's hard to generate particular areas. You know, it's hard to actually identify it specifically for one thing. But generally, what we're trying to look at is the trend over time. Could be, maybe. I don't know. The key thing to bear in mind, though, is we can make interventions and deal with this. So what this is showing, again, is the impact of doing repairs. So what we're seeing on the minimum night flow there, when there's been a repair done, and I think that first drop is caused by some of these repairs being shown here. Through that area, I beg your pardon, and there as well. So a couple of areas where the leak repairs on the scheme have resulted in a reduction in that minimum night flow. So minimum night flow doesn't directly measure the loss. As I said before, we're using it as a proxy. It doesn't distinguish between public versus private. So the figure we're using always has that private content as well. And the assumption of 2.5 is only an assumption. Interventions like nighttime pressure reduction also complicate that calculation, but we're not doing that on the Methven scheme. We tried to do some of that a number of years ago on the Ashburton scheme, where we had a routine set up in the control system, and it would arbitrarily lower the network pressure in the hours, in the small morning hours. The idea being that if you reduce the pressure on the scheme, you're reducing your losses.
Mayor Brown, question?
Yeah, can we go back a couple of graphs on what we won? No, back another one. That one. Back one more. No, that one.
Yeah.
What's RL?
Real losses, I think, is it? Sorry.
Is it real loss? And then the table on the left, that's litres per second, is it? The 2468 up to 14?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you look at the graph on the right from 2012-13 up to 23-24. It just gets worse and worse and worse.
It does take a leap up to the 60s.
Yep. So that's showing us there's more and more leaks, and we're not fixing them. So what's our contractor doing?
Well, I'll come to
Come
some
to
of the
it,
interventions anyway.
Okay.
Yep. Councillor Lovett?
I'm just looking at going back to those Alcathene joins. With all these leaks being repaired like that, how long do they, or do you expect them to last? Because I know they're not long lived. Are they ever checked? Are they breaking again, or?
Typically, the plastic fittings will last a good life. They'll have a good life in themselves, but it's usually the joints that create the problem. I think many years ago, and I'm sure Robin will have a view on some of this stuff, but many years ago, some of the early generation PE materials weren't they weren't as good as they are now. The modern materials have certainly improved dramatically. And the same thing happened in PVC. When PVC first came on the market, it was prone to brittle failure, but the new PVCs don't have those same issues. To answer your question, I don't know I can't remember what we're actually designing those things for. I think it might be 20-year lifespan, but invariably if the poor construction or it hasn't been installed correctly, some of that can impact on how much life you get out of it.
Because if you've got a piece on a street with a lot of those kind of repairs, you would consider replacing that whole pipe, would you?
Well, not necessarily. So we don't replace pipelines based on just fitting leaks. Usually the pipeline will be based on age and actual repairs that are occurring to the pipe itself, like a barrel failure on the pipe. Fittings are maybe an indicator, but they're not necessarily the only justification for doing a renewal.
Okay.
Councillor Mackle?
Thank you. Fittings, in my mind, Andy, would be bad installation. Are the repairs that you're doing recently in the older part of the scheme, or new developments, etc.? Where's the higher percentage?
Look, I haven't got that information to hand, sorry. I haven't done that analysis.
So you would have something in place for the contractors that have installed the systems. There would be some sort of thing in place that if there were leaks, damage, etc., over a 12-month period, that comes back onto them?
Certainly new development, when it's a vested asset, there are maintenance periods attached to some of that stuff.
Yeah, so a year, 2 years?
Yeah, 12 months usually.
Yeah.
We have had situations where if we are concerned about a development, we'll try and hold that for longer. But the difficulty is most of the developments are being done by companies that basically once the development's done, the company winds up and there's no one to pin. So there's a wee bit of a limit to how much we can do around that.
Mayor Brown?
Just lost my question. I know what it is. All the repairs will be GPSed or marked and whatever, and I know in roading we've seen they have a what do you call it? It's a colour map. The more repairs, and starts to go red, green and then for roading, I know they do that. Do you do that for water?
Not currently. Not currently. So the issue again is that they are certainly GPSed, and the data could be mapped very easily. We do it periodically. I know Chris does it dutifully when he's doing his program development. But as a routine thing, we're not doing it. The difficulty is we have to get right down to the failure mode to work out whether or not it's a main pipe issue or whether it's just fittings. Okay. If it's just fittings, it's not really telling us a lot. It's not really valuable. Certainly pipe bursts are a different story.
It would certainly get you to hone in on that area, then you could delve in again. I know we do it with roading, and it shows, it leads the roading program, and you can...
Heat map, yes.
The heat
that's
map,
right. Yep.
And it works very well there.
Yep.
Those are the roads that need fixing because they've got it's red, and I'm thinking it may be helpful here too for pointing to what needs repairing or replacing first. Yeah.
If I can just also explain that when a subdivision, when they vest the pipelines and the assets to council, they have to have a pressure test, hold that pressure for a certain length of time before it gets passed and vested to council.
And you do the same for the sewer?
Yes.
Who inspects the pipes when they're in a subdivision?
We have a CCTV inspection, and one of our project, or either our development engineer or project engineer, would be responsible for checking those.
Your people?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
For height and
to make sure it's all compliant. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll just talk briefly about the water balance. So the water balance is simply tracking the water and apportioning ownership either in the network loss or the property meters. It's very reliant on good quality data and some of the assumptions we have to make. So what we've done here is we've tracked the water loss over a whole lot of sequential metering periods, basically. So we've done a sort of a water balance across that. The green is the average daily demand, and the orange colour at the top is the network loss. And then that percentage up the top is what we're attributing to network. So this is where we've done the calculation and we've worked out what the network is losing. So before we were talking about those high 60s. In here we're talking about the network only. So this is the public loss, and that's around that 45 mark. You can see there's a fairly constant throughout, and then it starts to drop, change in a couple of places.
Couple of questions, Andy. We'll start down.
Yes, can I ask, are there meters in the main lines to check which part of the networks are leaking? And also, I note that the percentage of old pipe still in the scheme up there is something like between 20 and 30%. So that will be the old steel pipe from 100 years ago. Will that be correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
We haven't got, we don't have network meters. We had a couple of network meters on the trunk main just ahead of town. They went out of action some years back. We're looking to re-establish those as part of this year's program. But we don't have any sort of inter-zone metering within the network of Methven.
Megan, question?
I know that you always want to reduce as much water loss as you possibly can, but is there any benchmarking from other communities with similar water schemes and how we track compared to them?
I haven't done it recently. So we used to do the National Performance Report. We participated in that, and it was about 40 or 50 councils. We were definitely one of the higher, as a council, we were definitely one of the higher people in terms of water loss. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of steps in that loss, that network loss figure. We're sort of looking at some of these. There was one increase in water loss that reduces, and apparently that was associated with a cluster of CRMs being carried out.
So the 1148 use, that includes commercial as well, does it? So that's like just residential.
I think this is just residential.
It would be classed as quite high though, wouldn't it, compared to, because just to put it in context, Christchurch has a maximum of, I think it's 900 and you get charged above that. So they've obviously decided that below 900 is a normal usage, whereas 1148 is quite a high usage.
So comparing what we've just done with the minimum night flow suggested that around 60% of all water supplied was lost. The water balance suggests that the network losses are about 45%. So that basically means that 75% of the loss on the Methven supply is actually public loss, and 25% is on property private. And I mean, I'll be the first one to go on record and say that I thought it would be closer to 50-50. So the fact that we are sitting at 75% means that we've got some more work to do. When Chris wrote this presentation, he also did say that it's not a direct comparison, but it's indicative. So just a few health warnings on those percentages. So other information from the meters?
Just sorry, Andy, on that. We've just had a reasonable program of water main replacements through Methven as well, haven't we?
Yeah, well, we've had an ongoing program. Yeah. The difficulty we've always had is just balancing where best to spend our money. And I must admit, when we did the most recent program for the LTP, we were targeting some of the rural settlements to do a bit more work there. And we're going to come to it, but we're trying to justify now maybe having a re-look at the program to maybe better favour Methven. This is just a bit of an analysis of the meter information themselves. So this is the information, what's happening on property. So 1,213 total meters, 1,100 of them have flow. The ones that don't have flow, that'll be empty properties, subdivisions, what have you. 175 of those properties, of those meters were above 1 cubic metre per day. And that's the green line at the bottom of that graph. That's the cut-off point there. One of the highest was 33 cubes. But again, this information includes commercial, so that could be legitimate. The median was 470 litres per day, which, if you look at the standard figure that keeps banded around, 200 litres per person per day, that is about the 2.5 person household. 39 of the meters had a leak flag, so they're shown with orange dots. And of course, obviously, we can work with high users just to verify what they're doing with their water.
Councillor McMillan, question?
Thank you. Just regarding the higher users, so we've got a car wash in Methven, but I understand that that's not run off our water scheme. That's something different. Does anyone know if that's true or not?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, I don't know, because I just remember that during the boil water and, when we were trying to conserve water during the floods, they made a comment that our water is, so I don't know whether they've got their own tank or what they've got, because they would be a very high water user. And I also know that when, in the square, when open spaces do new plantings and they'll put the sprinkler on all day, they also say that that's tapped out of a different water scheme. But I don't know if it's coming from the creek or Alan, you may know.
Oh, wait, we'll go to Neil perhaps first. Neil?
Oh, yeah.
Yep, you go now. Yep.
Well, I can tell you that the old original water supply finishes at the golf course now, because we use that for our irrigation. So there'd only be the treated scheme going into town, so it would have to be, I presume, from the creek or somewhere. I don't know where else you'll get it. BCI goes as far as the showgrounds and rugby grounds, but I guess they're not getting it from there.
So just thinking the median, is that the median's not average, is it? What's the median? Just explain median to us.
Median is the midpoint.
Midpoint, right.
Yeah.
So to get the median, you've got the 33,000 cubes a day, and then you've got the zero. So you've got the 175 who are using nothing to get a median?
Yeah, I think, I think Chris excluded zeros for the purpose of this analysis.
Oh. That's not, it's the difference between 11 and 1,200, 1,300 and 1,300, whatever it is, yeah. Because when you look at the median, it looks okay, but it's not. I think it's a misleading figure. Well, it is what it is, but it's not painting the right picture, I don't think. Yeah.
Doesn't it show that anything above about a cubic metre a day is either a leak or a commercial usage, or something else is going on? Is that what it shows? Oh, sorry, Hamish got a hand. Hamish?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if you can hear. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I've just been sent a message. I apologise for butting in like this, but I've just been sent a message that Council's original resolution setting up this workshop was that it should be open to the public. So my earlier comments were more general and obviously in nature than the specific resolution setting up this workshop. So I apologise for that earlier advice not being specific enough for this workshop. But in terms of the door open and blinds up, etc., then that would give effect to Council's specific resolution for this workshop.
Thank you. We've got the blinds up, but we'll open the door. Yep.
So
Yeah, thank you.
we have recorded it, so
We
if
have recorded
someone,
it, so
if
could
someone thought they missed out, then we could give them the recording.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Thank you. We could start up the live stream from this point if that was council's will.
Well, how many more slides are left? There's 10 slides left. Tony? Yeah. Okay, we'll stick with the recording, but can we make the recording available then on?
Yeah. Will do. So I apologise. Sorry about that.
That's fine. I could go. Okay, so
Carry on.
just
Quickly while we're there, sorry. We did say, there'll be no charging with the meters going in. Did that exclude commercial? Do they?
They still, yeah, they're extraordinary users. They continue to get charged.
Yeah, thank you.
In most cases, the only difference for them was that they got a new smart meter.
just so of those high users, what percentage are commercial? Because obviously that's a different.
I don't know what that percentage is off the top of my head. Sorry.
That's fine.
So the alarms themselves, we talk about the fact that they provide a leak alarm. I just need to clarify this is not this alarm is not sent in real time. It's just a flag that appears literally on the face of the meter when the meter is being read. So that information is only available when we download the information or you visually look at the meter and you can see the flag showing there. It will flag a leak or burst pipe, backflow, an empty pipe, any tampering that might occur, and also a low battery. Obviously, when we do get the meters with leaks, we follow up with the landowner, and in most cases, the leak flag has gone by the next cycle.
Councillor McMillan?
So when you're following up with the landowner, is the contractor physically knocking on the door like they did to me, or is it just a letter in the mailbox, or how do you follow up?
Yeah, so most of these, if they're non-revenue meters, they'll be followed up by my staff. Well, they're followed up by my staff anyway, but they are usually just a phone call first, and there might be a letter go out advising them how to read the meter and provide them some resources on how to do their own self-checking. In most cases, it's not often you will get the contractor doing that. I think it was just happened as part of the actual rollout.
Yep.
So the contractor installed the new meter, saw it whizzing round, and made the comment. So I think that's possibly how you were alerted.
Yeah, and just a follow-up question, is it worth doing some comms around this? And I mean, it would be relevant for a lot of the district with, there's quite a few meters around the place to just make people aware that they can go out and read their own meter, and the best time to do it is last thing at night and first thing in the morning, and sort of do a bit of maths and see if you are losing anything, and then it just makes sense. I mean, we also have to, homeowners should be taking ownership as well on this, and just sort of making sure that they're checking that everything's going.
There's a lot of advice and resource on the council website on metering already, because obviously we've got customers long before the asset management meters went in. So a lot of that information is already available. I'm sure we could do a bit of a comms splash on it.
Yeah, I just think it might be worth it. It's probably a good time with having this result come through.
Councillor Hooper?
Thank you. Just sort of following on from Liz, are you getting a steer, Andy, on those properties that your team are visiting with leaks and things, of whether it's a toilet or what's actually causing the leak? So as part of the comms, you can say, hey, 73% of these are leaky toilets that we've discovered so far, so you might want to start there.
We'll have a wee bit of information on that, but the feedback we tend to get is so when, for the people that are being charged, they, and I'm talking about the extraordinaries, the residential D and people on the periphery of the scheme, they have, when they get a leak and they end up with a rather large bill, there is a mechanism for them to apply for a remission. And as part of that remission, they have to prove to us what they did to address the leak. So invariably, we do get that information as to what the nature of the offending leak was.
Yeah.
But certainly at the level here where we're talking all of the properties in Methven, we're probably just not going to be aware of what the nature of the leak was.
Yeah.
Could you just inform me, how are the meters read, Andy? Are they drive past or physically read, or how are they read?
Yeah, for the most part, they're with the smart meters. The new smart meters is effectively they drive down the street, and the recorder is actually polling the meter remotely. So there's no need necessarily to lift the lid and look at the meter. If there's meters that aren't being registered for whatever reason, then they have to get out and shine the torch down the hole.
How long does it take to read all the meters in Methven?
I think Methven takes about 2 or 3 days. Yeah, I think the whole metering run at the moment across the district, and this is commercial as well, I think it's about 2 weeks.
Yeah, Brown?
How often are the meters read?
The building meters are read quarterly. The asset management ones we're trying to read every 6 weeks.
So I know when we did the rubbish trucks, we upgraded that contract. We suggested that the water meter reader goes on the rubbish truck. It goes up and down the same streets once a week, I think. Why are we not doing that?
It's perhaps technology we could consider for the solid waste collection. We'll see. I'm not sure how well developed that is, but we'll certainly investigate and see if that's possible. It does make sense. I know it's done in Australia in some areas.
Yeah. Why wait till then if there's, save it 2 weeks, you won't do it everywhere, but these smart meters are in, why not investigate it and implement it ASAP on the rubbish trucks? Because they travel the same streets. About Methven in a day or less. Why does it take 2 days to go around Methven when we do it?
Councillor Hooper?
Thank you. Smart meters, we're calling them, will you see an upgrade eventually, Andy, where they send data into council and you'll be able to do it all from an office?
Yeah, so the progression for the system that we've gone down, or the track we've gone down, the reader unit that we're currently taking with us to read, you can install those permanently, on power poles and whatever, at multiple locations in the township, and then they will read back and then radio the information back.
Right.
So there is a pathway to getting rid of the labour component.
Do you see going forward the I can't pronounce the word, so the government water regulator will put it as part of the standard practice or to have readable meters? Where do you see that going in the future?
I don't think necessarily they'll regulate smart metering, but they might regulate metering, perhaps. I think they might not choose the technology, but I think if you value water, metering is an appropriate response. I think it's possibly particularly not particularly responsible if we're not measuring what we're supplying to our customers.
There's a saying, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, isn't that the saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could I ask, what's the odds of this being quite a few illegal takes in the town that could be altering this?
I think there's probably a high likelihood there are some illegal takes, but they're hard to find sometimes. I don't think it'll be significant, but there could be a few connections we don't know about.
Yeah, Brown?
What would be an example, Ellen, of an illegal take that you're possibly aware of?
I'm just thinking when they fixed all the water troughs in the A&P grounds, they found that the water was just coming straight out of the scheme somewhere, and there's odd leaks in it, and I don't think there was a meter on that originally. Yeah. So, how many old takes are coming off the old pipe that people have found and just plugged into that the council don't know about? That was my question. And how do you find them? That's the other thing.
I might have a job for Robin. Okay, so the data logging, the meters log the counter value and flow rate. This can be used to see how significant a leak is, and it also allows us to establish the typical water pattern and adjust the leak threshold. So just to be clear, when we do a normal read, it is just the counter value. But what you can do is data log the meter, which takes longer. You have to wait longer to download the data, but you can set the meter up to actually provide a whole 24-hour period, maybe 15-minute intervals, and we can access that information and provide better diagnostic, if you like, or better analysis. We don't do that typically, so our typical run is just to read the meter. So we've got a water loss issue. In terms of how you find where this is happening, we can use traditional manual acoustic leak detection, which is literally just trying to listen for the hiss of the leak. These can be permanently mounted in the network, or you can use semi-permanent sensors, which can be moved around. We typically engage a specialist contractor to come in and do it as a one-off job. They're just an example of some of the listening equipment they use. The other thing we can do is bulk metering, the question earlier. So you can divide the network into real or virtual zones and meter all the water that goes into a zone and out. And just remember, we've now got meters on every property, so this means we can do water balances literally at a zone level, which is really, really helpful for tracking down where the losses might be occurring. Obviously, the trunk mains, we suspect the trunk mains could be a source of some of this leakage, and council has approved spending some money on metering on those trunk mains. Pressure zones, so this is about identifying areas where you can have different, just sort of seeing what the network's doing at a pressure level. There are obviously issues around the bottlenecks. State Highway 77, invariably you have different ability to have pass-through water mains on state highways and things. And also you could bulk meter the cul-de-sacs as well. That diagram there is just showing pulling out the trunk mains and identifying that specifically as a separate water balance, which we will be able to do once those network meters are in.
Those trunk main meters installation, you've got the budget for it. When are they going in?
I believe Hernando's team's been briefed on that work now, so it'll be up to them to program it in.
They need to be in sooner rather than later, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but some money's there now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to wait until May for them to go in. The ASAP, I'd have thought.
So the other approach, well, it's a sort of an in tandem approach, is to obviously maintain our renewal program. A renewal obviously fixes the existing leaks that may be undetected. It reduces the chance of new leaks developing because you're starting from a brand new pipework. It just has to be recognised that it's not a 100% fix. Obviously, though, everything that goes in the ground will start to age and deteriorate. So again, leaks will appear eventually on the new stuff as well. So in terms of what we're suggesting next, we're proposing to continue doing leak detection annually. So Methven will be on that list. We'll continue to do that. We're looking to install the bulk water meters. And the last thing we're proposing to do, obviously with Council's blessing, we would like to reprioritise the capital program in order to accelerate pipeline renewals in Methven. There are some more options, but we're not proposing them at this stage. We could go to permanent leak detection installation equipment, putting it permanently installed. We could extend zone metering in the Methven Township, and we could put in permanent meter reading equipment, as we discussed earlier. But we're not proposing those at this stage.
So the bulk meter ones, they'll be real time readable, won't they? So
they'll be telemetered. Yeah, yep. They'll be coming back continuously. So increasing renewals in Methven to address high water loss. We will keep up with renewals on other high loss schemes: Ashburton, Hinds, Rakaia, Mount Somers, and Drumore. The priority areas in Methven. So that list of water mains on those streets, we've split it against the various material types. The green ones that you see there are the ones that are already on the program, and we're proposing to add a few more in. So that is the LTP program as it was adopted. So you'll see there a list of renewals right through to year 9. What we're now proposing, and that's just the list for years 2, 3, and 4, you can sort of see what we're trying to achieve. As far as what this capital program, this reprioritisation actually means, what we've done here is we've compared the originally adopted LTP with what we're talking about, a modified version. You'll see there's a slight increase in year 2, a marginal decrease in 3. But overall, over the course of the 10-year period, the difference in the programs is actually slightly less. It's less than 50K. No, that's the entire program. Yeah. Because what we're mindful of is that if what we're doing is we're saying, okay, some of the ones we were going to do, we're going to push out a bit further, and we're going to put our effort into Methven just initially. So some projects that were in year 3 and 4 have moved out in order to prioritise Methven. That concludes the presentation.
Yep. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Is there any way of calculating the savings by advancing that work from, not having to treat all this water that's getting wasted and pump it and everything else? Is there any way of calculating what that may be?
There would be a way of doing it. There's quite a few complex assumptions and things to make, but yeah, you could. Yeah. Sort of a cost-benefit analysis, basically. Yeah.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. So when we agreed to do this trial, whenever it was, 3-4 years ago, it's taken a while to get to this stage, obviously, but I'm thinking the rest of the district, we've got meters in Mount Somers, Mayfield, Fairton, a few other places. So are they tracking okay? Do we need to be then looking at what's happening there, or was Methven always sort of a bit of a hotspot because we knew that there was so much water being used?
Yeah, I think if I had, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but I think if we knew then what we know now, the program would be similar to what you see in front of you, sort of back there. In terms of the other townships, we know we've got leakage in those townships as well, and they're still being favoured in the proposed program. What's being sacrificed is potentially some early year projects in Ashburton that are being pushed out further out in favour of Methven. So we should be able to still maintain efforts in Mount Somers. In Hinds, I think, is another candidate that's getting a lot of renewals.
Councillor Lovett.
The one thing I was just going to ask is the other infrastructure. You know, you're going to go down these streets and put all new water pipes, and often the residents get upset because you come and put new water pipes down, and a year later you're putting down sewage pipes. And I'm just thinking, if the water pipes are leaking, now what's the sewage system like? Should you be, I know it's going to be expensive, but do you need to look at both so you're only digging up streets once?
Yeah, so we typically do coordinate our programs as much as we can.
Yeah.
An example of that was in Elizabeth Street in front of the hospital, where we had a sewer main that needed renewal around about the same time as the water main. So those projects were combined for expressly that reason. So we do look at that, but also we have to be realistic. If the sewer is functioning okay, if the performance is okay, we would rather delay that rather than bring it unnecessarily forward.
Right.
Hamish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy, I wonder if you could reflect on the meters being trialled on Methven, and the value of the meters, and how we should consider Ashburton not being metered. Because one of the things that occurs to me in this discussion is that we're clearly responding to the need in Methven that's been shown by the meters, and that's entirely appropriate and reasonable. But of course we are, as you say, reprioritising away from Ashburton, where we don't have meters and therefore can't see the problem in the same detail. Do you think that the reprioritised program makes sense to a degree, but does it really mean that we'll have more knowledge in some parts of the district than others, and actually what we should be doing is having the same degree of knowledge across all the suppliers, i.e. metering Ashburton?
Well, look, I think metering Ashburton is inevitable. I think we absolutely should. But you're right. We are only responding to the information we have in front of us at the moment. And the metering of Ashburton could indeed bring us, better information and more knowledge about how it's going with its program. The only thing I would say, we have spent a lot of time in Ashburton. We are progressively making our way through Ashburton. So scheme to scheme, Ashburton is probably faring okay.
Yeah. Is it true to say at the moment in our LTP there are there's no budget provision to meter Ashburton?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, my understanding is if we were to bring it back in, the next opportunity would be the next LTP or through an LTP amendment.
So that is the challenge for council, because I think what we're seeing is real value in the trial in Methven, and it's showing things we didn't know, and we now have a plan to improve and correct. But at a bigger level, it shows the value of metering, and we don't currently have plans to take that lesson and apply it to Ashburton. What would your estimate be of, and this is putting on the spot a little, but do you have any broad brush estimates of the cost and time it would take to meter Ashburton?
I'm going from memory, but I believe the combined project for Ashburton and Rakaia, because that's the other scheme that's not metered, was $5 million.
Okay, so that's an issue for council to think through as we approach either an annual plan or the potential of an LTP amendment, if that's council's will. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamish. Annette?
Just following on from that, I'm thinking about the government's new water service bill, which we're all going to have to start thinking about and doing plans and that. Putting water meters in Ashburton and Hines and Rakaia would actually give us some information to be able to put in plans and do some costings, so we're in good foot if we do this as ourselves or join with another region. At least we know what we're talking about and know what we need to kind of plan for expense-wise and that. So I think we need to start thinking about whether we add it on to the LTP or putting it in the next annual plan, because inevitably we've got to do it. Yeah.
Andy, are there any other things coming up? Because obviously we've done our long-term plan with that's in place, that you see that, because obviously if we've got the priorities from Methven, because we can see, we actually identify it. But are there any other major risks that we face within our Ashburton water supply that we should be thinking of, that are, and more that have come up recently with different work we've been doing?
Look, you've got me on the spot. I don't recollect anything that's not already addressed in the LTP. Apart from surprises that might come out of a metering rollout and the information that might deliver, I think we're probably okay. Obviously, the big project for Ashburton at the moment is obviously the UV, and that's our focus at the moment.
Thank you. Mayor Brown?
Yeah, I think about the business as usual. We have a contractor who goes out and fixes repairs, but they don't seem to be getting ahead. At Methven anyway, they've still got the same loss for when the meters went on, and they're out there repairing. They're not gaining any traction. The amount of water we're losing is still the same, or increasing at times, of loss. So, yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just thinking how was the meters funded for Methven, the installation? Was it through targeted rate or?
Yeah, so Methven's part of the group, the group water area, so it's funded across the wider group, but yeah, targeted rate.
But it's targeted across all water users in the whole district?
All except Montalto.
Montalto.
Yeah.
Isn't that one of the equity for all users is one of our benchmarks of the water thing?
Yeah.
Councillor Todd?
Thank you. Do we get leaks caused by earth movement, like with earthquakes and things? Is that an issue, or I can understand old pipes leaking, but is that a?
It is a valid concern, and one of the sort of the measures we've taken now is to move away from a rigid pipe. We're starting to use PE pipe more and more now. So the example, the renewals that we've just done, most of that was PE pipe. But for that reason, it's more resilient.
Probably the one thing I haven't observed through the presentation, I think it was really good, was just breaking it back to a financial savings, because we're putting this water infrastructure in. It's I guess communicating that to the community that we're not just spending these money to save some water. It's actually, this is the money we're saving the district. I don't know if that's something you could calculate or work through, or.
I think this was raised earlier. So some sort of net present value or cost benefit analysis. I think that's probably, it could be worthwhile doing. Yeah.
Councillor Mackle?
Thank you. Andy, what's the general distance between valves and the main line where you can switch off an area?
Oh, it varies. Most valves tend to arrive at intersections, so depending on the length of the road, that's usually what the driver is. There will be some inter-block connections that also have valves as well, but there's no hard and fast rule.
So over 100 metres, say, what would be the cost of cameraing a main line?
A water main?
Yes.
Have you done that? Yeah,
Yes.
We don't do that typically, do we? It's not typically done.
I was just trying to think, instead of rushing in and metering all around the main lines as such, if you could turn off valves in certain areas where you suspect there's leaks, like sort of old pipe sort of, and jam a camera down there just to have an inspection quickly. Would that be vulnerable?
I'm not aware of anybody applying that technology.
If I may,
Oh, Rob? Yep. Yep.
there we go. To camera a water main is not a normal thing, but in a situation like that, what they would do is set up your acoustic leak detection over that from valve to valve, and then check a section using a system that is actually very accurate, and it just takes time to set it up. And where there is no intermediate valves like on trunk mains, and that it's very difficult to get your leak detection to work. Whereas in town, they're going valve to valve, which is the same as doing your cameraing, but doing it acoustically. And that works very successfully.
Just going back to what Neil was saying before, and Andy, it seems that we're wasting more water now that we've got the data from the meters. It looks like we're wasting a shitload more. So we need to be looking at ourselves more, obviously. I was just sort of wondering, is there a hard and fast way just to get around somewhere and find where it's obviously leaking in our own main lines quickly, instead of having to spend time and money on metering?
Yeah, I think the benefit of the metering has allowed us to focus. That's what it delivers. It tells us where the worst of it is. I think we're probably doing okay. It's just that what happened was when we did our first program, we were working on some assumptions which were incorrect. And I mean, that's the problem with assumptions. They tend to be great until you get proved wrong. So our first program was based on the fact that we are renewing pipe in Methven, and we're renewing pipe in Ashburton, and we're trying to pick the best ones. What we've found with this information now is that maybe we need to accelerate that same renewal program in Methven, and I think that's probably the best bang for the buck. Notwithstanding that maybe some cost-benefit analysis is worthwhile.
Mayor Brown?
A couple of questions. It was in not just your PowerPoint, but the other report we got, talked about when the meters went on, there were some homes that were using a lot of water, and you sent them letters to address that. It did say how many letters you sent. Of those letters you sent, did they all fix their leaks, or did they ignore it?
I actually don't know the summary of where the status of those. Sorry, yeah.
So we probably need to find out that they've done what they should have done, that they not keep repeating the same sin. And also, when you're renewing pipes, and it's probably only Ashburton and Rakaua because the rest have got meters now, you do a street and you replace a new pipe, replacing an old one. Should you, at the same time, you'll be doing the laterals to the houses, I assume. Do you put meters on at the same time?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, currently we do, yeah.
And I would say carry on doing that.
Yeah.
Because it's all dug up at the same time. Yeah. Good.
Councillor Mackel?
Thank you. Just on the renewing of the pipe, Andy, it would be my understanding that it's just guesswork on, you will renew so many metres here, but we could be renewing the wrong area. There could be worse leaks somewhere else. If we found out where those leaks were and fixed what actually needs fixing, instead of just taking a punt and thinking that, hey, we'll do it here.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to, to underplay what we do in the program development. I mean, it's not just, we're not throwing darts at the map. We are using a wee bit of information. I mentioned before that Chris does do quite a bit of work around analysing the CRM history of the scheme he's looking at. We'll be doing some, taking information from other reports that we've already done. So there is a wee bit of science in the program that was originally developed. The only issue is we're responding to some additional information from the metering project, which is telling us we need to do a bit more in Methven. And
Cross-
that's fundamental what we're doing.
Crossperson Neil.
Yeah, also, we are continuing with our leak detection program. So every year we do have leak detection done. So we'll focus on the areas where the pipes are older and undergo our leak detection. We still do an annual leak detection program, and that's what will suggest which renewals to bring forward, or the order or priority of renewals.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. I'm just looking at our long-term plan, and it does talk about the infrastructure strategy, and that's where the water meters for the remaining schemes is mentioned, and it just says water meter installation, installing water meters on our remaining schemes to better manage water demand. This will be used for detection of water leakages, not to charge for water, and I think that's another key message to kind of get out there. If we end up putting water meters on in Ashburton and Rakaia, it's not because we're going to charge people, it's just purely for detection, but it's in the long-term plan as part of the infrastructure strategy, which is a 30-year plan, isn't it? So it's mentioned, but we just haven't allocated any money in this LTP.
Mayor Brown?
Just following on from Rob's question about metering houses, with what the data we've got from the Methven trial is, I think it said we're losing 75% of our water is in the mains. So putting meters on Ashburton is going to pick up, if you correlate the same thing through, only 25% of the water. If Ashburton's losing water, 75% of it's in the mains, as you assume the same problems are in Methven. So the focus needs to be on the mains. So you need those big meters on. And I remember us talking about this years ago with Daryl Nelson and Councillor Nelson and Councillor Ledley were here. You need the meters on the main pipes, and I don't know if we've got them on or not yet, but I know they were talking about it back 10 years ago.
Can I just say, so metering in order to identify, say we put a water meter on a trunk, on a main into a cul-de-sac, the ability to identify whether that main has a problem, we have to be able to exclude the volume going to the properties. So if we don't have universal metering, we actually don't know the answer. We're still a wee bit blind. So that's why it sort of has to be universal metering and trunk main network metering.
Yeah, correct. But if you have, in the lack of those meters, if you can isolate a block with the meter on it, you can turn each house off for an hour while you measure it. It will be inconvenient, but you need to find those leaks. And yeah, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Councillor Hooper?
Thank you. I just have a question around when we do a renewal and put a smart meter on the house in Ashburton, has that been comms, or should it be just for transparency? I'm just worried about if we do make a decision to bulk meter Ashburton, and then we say, oh well, we've actually done this street, and this street. I'm just worried about people going, oh yeah, bloody council, we didn't know anything about that. They've started under, behind our backs and rah-de-rah-de-rah. So have we been transparent with that? And
Yeah, I don't know how transparent it is. It's just been standard practice for some years. But we can do some comms around that if it was thought to be useful.
just putting it out there.
I'd put further to what Councillor McMillan talked about metering. I know it's in charging, it's not in the long-term plan, but it is something that we'll need to start discussing and thinking about for the next one, and because it builds on Mayor Brown's comment. If you have very high users, what's the incentive to stop being a very high user? There is none. You just carry on. There's no incentive at all. So I'm not talking about limiting people to ridiculously low limits. I'm just talking about the very high users, the ones that use 2 cubes a day because their pipes leak. We need to have eventually. We need to have some way of incentivising change. That may be a discussion we have to have in the future. Megan?
I think part of it could be that cost-benefit analysis that we're talking about. To pick up on your comment just then about taking people along the journey with the meters being bulk installed is you've got a case study with Methven and how that was accepted, or the process that went through Methven. So I guess look at the success and failures of that process and see what you could apply to Ashburton if that's the path you go down.
Any more questions? If you bear with me, I've got a list here of things that, so we had, number one was public information about what's happening out there, and, you know, so that they understand what leaks are, and I think you said it's on the website, but maybe that was something comms could push forward. There was water metering of the trunk lines, the bulk meters, the money's there, get them in. There was a question around the repairs that are being done. That's obviously an operational issue, but there was questions if things, that leaks are going up, are we gaining any ground? There was a question around the reading of the meters, whether it could be more automated off rubbish trucks. And there was questions around district water metering and not charging for water, but incentivising not reductions in use, but reductions in wastage is probably more what we're talking about. And that goes to the district council, but there's a two-pronged attach. There's their own pipes, but there's also private pipes. And the detection of water leaks is just ongoing. It's a business as usual thing. Anything I've missed there? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. We'll finish this at